Like and subscribe and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
A Liberal Party guided by right-wing commentators is in serious trouble. May 25, 2022, 5.00 Save login, register or subscribe to save articles for later. Share normal text size, larger text size, very large text size, 363. View all comments. Federal election 2022 full election results. ALP 75, LNP 57 in 10 GRN 30th 276 seats needed for a majority 4 still to call. 76.22% counted. Updated May 26, 2022. 4:18 p.m. If only there was a vaccine to protect election losers from the outbreak of delusions in the aftermath of defeat. Though if such a jab existed, it would deny the election winners a wicked pleasure, sneering at the losers as they grapple with the first stages of grief, shock and denial. Scott Morrison concedes defeat on Saturday night. Credit, Getty Images. The narrative according to a chorus of hardline coalition MPs and columnists goes like this. The Morrison government positioned itself as Labour-light, experimenting with the poison of leftism, according to South Australian Liberal Alex Antic, because it caved in on net zero emissions, racked up budget deficits, abandoned freedom during the pandemic and shirked on fighting culture wars. This shameless Marxist posture, say the critics, not only failed to placate voters in the Liberals' traditional seats, those folks having long metamorphosed into Maoists and not for the turning, but alienated the party from the quiet Australians and blue-collar battlers the party ought to regard as its real base. In this construction, the battlers are less concerned about climate change than they are focused on cost of living pressures and whether their kids are being indoctrinated into radical doctrines at school. They seem curiously unconcerned about a minimum wage rise, however. The loser's lament has some worthy variations. A more subtle take came from Andrew Bolt, his heartfelt prose notwithstanding, who'd vote for such a mewling pack of self-haters with so little self-respect that they won't even sack a party traitor like Malcolm Turnbull. According to Bolt, the Morrison government's problem was as much one of hypocritical cant as it was one of capitulation. He's right about the former, at least. Thus, the coalition admits climate change is a threat but promises less than Labour and the Greens to tackle the supposed scourge. Admits an Indigenous voice to Parliament is necessary but won't have it enshrined in the Constitution. Admits it has a women problem but won't succumb to quotas. And so on. Alan Tudge, under a cloud before the election, but now one of only a few urban Melbourne Liberal MPs left standing, which immediately confers upon him prophet status, said the coalition's strong rhetoric on China brought a backlash from Chinese Australian voters in the eastern suburbs. Otherwise, Tudge suggested the coalition was blamed for not standing up enough to the Andrews government over its lockdowns. This freedom theme is confusing. Frankly, the whole thing's confusing, so bear with me as I try to pick my way through it. As several pundits have pointed out, anger about coronavirus restrictions saw big anti-Labour swings in safe Victorian seats. Those motivated by anti-Dan sentiment had cause enough to favour the coalition. Scott Morrison went out of his way to express his understanding of the sometimes violent anti-lockdown protesters, so it's somewhat counterintuitive to argue the coalition was punished for not opposing the lockdowns more aggressively. We do know the Morrison government was punished for seeking to interfere with the McGowan government's freedom to control its borders so that Western Australians could stay healthy and free. And who knew that persistent blows against universities, excluding them from JobKeeper, hiking humanities fees, vetoing research grants, and stoking anxieties around transgender children and athletes during an election campaign constitute a refusal to fight the culture wars? We can, however, say these battles were all picked and clumsily fought, with the coalition mistaking Sydney's western suburbs for Republican red states where book banning and demonising transgender medicine is all in a day's work. But post-defeat denialism is not confined to the coalition. After successive election losses during the Howard years, it was common in Labour ranks to chide the party for running a coalition-like platform on asylum seekers or budget deficits. Labour was never going to out-coalition the coalition, The True Believers argued, while the party's Me Tooism bled leftist votes to the Greens. Putting aside questions of morality, the criticisms were contestable because they misread the reality of where key voters had landed on offshore processing and fiscal management. The electorate is admittedly more fragmented these days and even harder to read. We can say the Morrison government's